They say you can tell a lot about a company by the way they fire people. Well, I could tell this place was rotting from the inside the moment they gave Linda from marketing a $200 DoorDash gift card for her early retirement and then made her train her replacement. That was 3 months ago. She cried in the break room between walking the intern through Tableau dashboards. I bought her a gas station donut and a black coffee. She said it was the nicest thing anyone had done for her all week. So yeah, by the time I got the knife, I wasn't surprised. Just insulted. But we're not there yet. For the past 10 years, I was the compliance manager at a mid-sized tech company that loved buzzwords and hated scrutiny. You know the type: open floor plan, unlimited PTO, which means you never take it, and kombucha on tap to distract you from the fact that your boss makes triple your salary to golf with strategic partners. My job was simple on paper: reconcile vendor invoices, flag anomalies, make sure the books didn't look like abstract art when the auditors came knocking. In reality, I was the last dam holding back a flood of financial diarrhea no one wanted to admit was seeping through the foundation. Most days started the same: arrive early, the mug no one else used, a chipped one that said world's okayest boss, fire up Excel, and dive into a pile of expense reports that made less sense than a toddler's crayon drawing. Like, why did team building Topgolf cost $8,927? And why did it include 6 separate Uber rides to a steakhouse afterward, all under the same VP's name? You learn to stop asking out loud. You just document, timestamp, and save it to your CYA folder. Cover your ass. Now, before we go further, hey, yeah, you. If you're listening to this and you've made it this far without hitting that subscribe button, what are you even doing? 90% of folks never subscribe, and it bums the team out worse than HR's pizza parties. Hit that like, hit that sub. It keeps our petty little revenge engine running. All right, back to the drama. So there I was in my well-worn groove. Paper pusher, ghost in the hallway, invisible cog in a broken machine. The kind of employee they forget to invite to the company picnic, but definitely remember when payroll goes sideways. My boss, Warren, the kind of man who thought synergy was a personality, once told me during a one-on-one, "Your job's important, but not essential." He said it while sipping a $7 matcha latte I expensed for him because he forgot his card. Charming guy. Warren loved creating vague line items like special projects and innovation strategy allocation. Translation: slush funds. One time I flagged a $12,000 charge listed under creative team revitalization, which turned out to be a weekend at a Napa Valley resort for him and 3 consultants who all had the same last name and only appeared in his Instagram stories. He made me remove the expense note that said, "This is not a real business expense," and replace it with leadership retreat. I added a smiley face. He didn't notice. But here's the part no one saw. For the last 6 months, I'd been working with an external auditor named Ben. Quiet guy, sharp as hell, wore the same corduroy blazer every time he came in. He started poking around after a random vendor audit raised red flags. At first, it was just routine questions. Then it became biweekly sit-downs. Eventually, I started saving everything. Every shady approval. Every oops forgot to loop you an email. Every invoice that didn't match a deliverable. Warren didn't notice. He was too busy adding golf balls to his calendar like they were meetings. I wasn't planning anything, not at first. I mean, who actually thinks their boring little compliance job will one day blow the hinges off the executive floor? But the universe has a sense of humor. And Warren, well, Warren made a fatal mistake. He thought I was harmless. It hit my inbox at 3:14 p.m. like a digital sucker punch. Subject line: exit interview 30 minutes, no preamble, no hey can we talk, not even a passive-aggressive Slack message. Just a sterile Outlook box sitting there between a phishing awareness training reminder and a lunch order confirmation from the cafe downstairs. Sender: HR operations. Not even a name. Cold as a corpse. I clicked it out of pure reflex, thinking maybe it was sent by mistake. Maybe some poor intern meant to schedule it for someone else, someone who deserved it. But no, there it was. My name bolded and alone, top of the attendee list. Location: conference room B. Time: Friday, 9:30 a.m. Duration: 30 minutes, like that's all the time you need to sweep 10 years of loyalty under the rug. No subject line modifiers. No thank you for your service boilerplate. Just a digital bullet to the skull. My first thought wasn't panic. It was, of course. Of course they didn't have the guts to look me in the eye. Of course Warren didn't send it himself. That man couldn't fire up a microwave without burning a bridge. HR was his human shield, the beige army of just following protocols whose job was to sand down all the sharp edges left behind by men like him. I stared at the invite for a good 5 minutes. Didn't accept. Didn't decline. Just hovered over it like maybe the pixels would rearrange themselves into something more humane. They didn't. Then, as if on cue, Warren strolled past my desk, pretending not to notice me, even though he always pretended too hard. I watched his reflection in the screen as he fake-chatted with the sales director about Q4 opportunities and pipeline synergy. His voice had that extra layer of performative volume, like he was trying to remind everyone he was still alpha. He didn't even glance in my direction. No nod, no hey, can we talk later? Just straight into the hallway and out of sight, probably off to approve another $3,000 client dinner with no client in sight. I could almost hear the wheels in his head. Once she's gone, no one will ask questions. That was the moment it shifted. The sting of betrayal began to simmer into something sharper. Not rage, not yet, but a kind of bitter clarity, the flavor of a truth I'd always known but never wanted to swallow. I wasn't leaving because I failed. I was leaving because I made it harder for him to get away with failing. And that's when the thought hit me. Not like lightning, more like the click of a perfectly cut puzzle piece snapping into place. I reopened the calendar invite, clicked accept, then hovered over the little gray plus sign labeled add optional attendee. You ever watch someone pull the pin on a grenade like they're stirring tea? I typed the name, Benjamin Alston, the external auditor. The man who'd been quietly documenting Warren's creative accounting for 6 months. He didn't work for us. He worked for a third-party firm contracted for our annual audit, but I'd made sure he saw everything I saw. Not because I expected this, just insurance. Just in case the sky fell, I added him, no note, no explanation, just a silent flag in the system. Then I hit send, and for the first time all day I smiled. The next 2 hours passed like I was floating underwater. No one said anything, but the air felt charged, as if somewhere in the system the machine had noticed something was off. I kept working, quietly, efficiently, reconciled vendor payments, cross-checked some purchase orders, forwarded 3 flagged reimbursements to HR, just to stay consistent. But my hands weren't shaking anymore. Let them think I'd go quietly. Let them think I was just another disposable cog. They were about to find out what happens when the paper pusher stops pushing and starts pulling strings. I didn't cry. That's what surprised me. You'd think after a decade of dragging this company's bloated corpse through every audit cycle, I'd at least tear up watching it toss me like expired printer toner. But no, I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I smirked. It was the kind of smirk you get when the school bully swings at you and doesn't realize you already loosened the bolts on his lunch tray. While the rest of the floor buzzed with Friday faux energy, sales guys chest bumping over closed deals, interns pretending to work in Notion dashboards, I sat at my desk, calm as a coma. My fingers clicked through invoice folders like it was any other day. If someone had taken a photo of me right then, they'd have captioned it mid-level compliance drone at peace. No one would have guessed I was prepping a corporate execution. Thing is, I'd already done the hard part. I'd already gathered the receipts. Literal and metaphorical. Over the last 6 months, every oddity Ben, the auditor, noticed, I matched with an internal paper trail. Why did the same vendor show up under 5 aliases? Why did Project X Marketing invoice us for services identical to those billed by Unified Brand Intelligence just 3 days later? Why was the same signature used on 2 separate approval chains, both allegedly signed in person on the same date, hours apart, in different cities? Warren had answers. He always had answers. Usually delivered with a wink and a coffee that somehow cost $11. Ben wasn't a VP. He didn't care about charm. He cared about patterns. And me, I was the pattern. I was the invisible constant in every invoice stream, every ledger update, every bizarre expense that passed through accounting like a sneeze in a hurricane. Ben didn't say much, just raised an eyebrow sometimes. That was our code. A raised eyebrow meant document this. 2 raised eyebrows meant get a backup off the shared drive before someone accidentally deletes it. So I had it all, timestamps, versions, metadata trails that Warren wouldn't be able to scrub with a flamethrower. I wasn't trying to be a whistleblower. I was just a woman who hated loose ends. And now, thanks to one cowardly calendar invite, I wasn't cleaning up Warren's mess anymore. I was gift wrapping it. I opened my inbox again and stared at the invite, not out of doubt, just appreciating the poetry. They'd scheduled it for 9:30 a.m. Probably figured it'd be early enough to avoid questions from the lunch crowd. Give me just enough time to pack my little cardboard box of cubicle memories before the rest of the rats scurried in. But they forgot something important, something every compliance officer learns sooner or later. There's no such thing as a clean break when you owe receipts. I clicked accept. Then I added Ben as an optional attendee. No message, no warning, just his name, slotted in like a scalpel tucked neatly into a surgeon's tray. Would he show? I didn't know. Auditors weren't usually in exit interviews, but I'd done my part. I'd opened the door. And if I knew Ben, and I did, he wouldn't be able to resist peeking through. After I sent it, I stood up, walked to the break room, poured myself a coffee from the communal pot, the one that always tasted faintly of pennies and regret. Nobody looked up. HR had probably already been whispering. I could feel it in the way people blinked too quickly when I made eye contact. Fine, let them squirm. Let them pretend I'd vanished before I was even gone. Back at my desk, I reopened the invoice folder for special projects, the one Warren thought no one checked unless legally forced. I scrolled to the entry marked vendor, Phoenix Synergy Group. No address, no contact name. $187,900 billed for strategic alignment consulting. Ben had once asked, what the hell is strategic alignment anyway? I told him whatever the guy signing the check wants it to be. Now, for the first time in months, I felt something strange. Not fear, not sadness, something cleaner. Resolve. Let's see what happens when the girl in the beige cubicle pulls the fire alarm. Monday arrived like a hangover in a Hawaiian shirt. The office smelled like burnt coffee and artificial citrus. Someone overdid it with the plug-in diffuser near the reception desk, like masking rot with lemon zest would fix morale. I walked in at 8:01 a.m., same as always, badge still working, workstation still humming. You'd never know I was marked for deletion. Except you would. People stopped making eye contact. My usual hallway nods turned into awkward shoulder turns. Danielle from procurement used to overshare her Tinder dates with me every Thursday, suddenly couldn't remember how elevators worked. She stood there pretending to read an HR flyer about workplace mindfulness like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls. The whispers weren't loud, but they were surgical. Not gossip, more like damage control. They'd seen the exit interview on the shared calendar. They knew better than to ask. Around here, curiosity was treated like theft. You ask one question, and suddenly you're not aligned with the company's evolving priorities. Meanwhile, Warren was living his best life, strutting through the office with the grace of a constipated peacock, holding a Starbucks cup he didn't pay for, and talking just a bit too loud about Q4 growth verticals. The man had all the subtlety of a toddler with a megaphone. He even cracked a joke at the Monday stand-up about leaning down the org chart. Got a couple pity laughs. Probably thought he nailed it. He didn't even look at me. That was the part that nearly made me laugh. The sheer theater of pretending I didn't exist. As if my chair had already been removed, my files wiped, my name etched off the plaque in the bathroom rota. I half expected him to walk through me like I was a ghost, but I wasn't gone yet, and I had no intention of making my exit clean. Still, I played along. No drama, no paper trails of rage, just quiet, surgical orderliness. I spent most of Monday finishing handoff notes for the poor soul who'd inherit my digital purgatory. I updated SOPs, archived compliance logs, and scheduled a few reminder emails to send next week, each one pointing to a little time bomb Warren never disarmed. I didn't even take lunch. Just sat at my desk, fingers gliding over the keyboard, the hum of injustice buzzing softly in my spine. At 3 p.m., dropped a manila folder in accounting labeled Unreconciled Exceptions Q2 Q4. Inside, 37 pages of petty fraud dressed up like strategy. I didn't highlight anything, just attached a sticky note that said, in case anyone asks later. I made sure my digital trail was clean, too. No passive-aggressive emails, no cryptic Slack messages, just the pristine calm of a woman who's already moved on in spirit while her body finishes the paperwork. Around 4:30, Warren passed by again, this time deep in conversation with our CTO about streamlining financial oversight. I nearly bit my tongue in half. This man once submitted a receipt for a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue as data backup storage. He didn't even try, just assumed no one would dare question it. And they didn't accept me. But that was the game, right? Keep the room just dumb enough to applaud nonsense, and you can do whatever you want. Only now the room wasn't as dumb as he thought. I'd made sure of that. At 5 o'clock, I shut down my monitor and locked the drawer to my desk. I left the office with nothing but my purse, my backup drive, and a calm so sharp it could cut glass. No tears, no goodbyes, just one final email to HR. Per policy, all files have been archived. Please let me know if anything remains outstanding before Friday. It was the kind of email that said, I'm not mad. I'm just making sure there's a record before the fire spreads. That night, I microwaved leftover pad thai and rewatched the exit interview invite. It was still on my calendar. Still confirmed, still included one optional attendee. Ben hadn't removed himself, and Warren, he still hadn't seen it, or if he had, he assumed it was a clerical error. He always did. Let him swagger. Let them all whisper. The silence was about to get loud. Friday morning came draped in fake warmth. The receptionist chirped out a toot cheerful happy Friday. As I badged in, I gave her the kind of smile you reserve for people who mean well but are complicit anyway. My heels clicked down the hallway like punctuation marks, one step for every lie I'd watched get rubber stamped, one step for every time I was told to stay in my lane. I was early. Of course I was early. Conference room B was already set up. Windowless, beige, depressing in that corporate purgatory kind of way. The table had been wiped clean, probably by the same intern who would be repurposing my desk by Monday. There was a pitcher of water, a legal pad no one would use, and 3 chairs, 2 upright, 1 slightly crooked, like even it didn't want to be there. At 9:27, I took my seat. At 9:29, HR arrived. Julie, from Employee Lifecycle, walked in with the smug serenity of someone who thought passive cruelty was just business efficiency. She gave me that pursed lip smile that said, I've done this 100 times, and I'll do it 100 more. Thanks for being prompt, she said, sliding into the chair across from me like we were about to review my smoothie subscription, not my entire professional existence. I nodded. One-word answers were my armor now. At 9:30, she began. I just want to thank you for your years of service and acknowledge the contributions you've made to the team. She had notes. Bullet points. Pre-approved talking points from the same template they probably used for laying off janitors and C-level execs alike. A few lines about organizational restructuring, one soft warning about proprietary information, and something about COBRA benefits. I didn't hear most of it. I was watching the time. And then, at 9:33, the door opened. Ben walked in like a man late to lunch, not a man holding a metaphorical detonator. No fanfare, no announcement, just a quiet nod, a pulled-out chair, and a laptop he placed carefully in front of him. He didn't say hello, he didn't look at me, but he was there. I saw Julie's brow furrow slightly. Auditors weren't standard in these meetings, but she said nothing. Warren, however, was a different story. Because yes, he had shown up, 3 minutes late, of course. Wearing his I'm a chill boss fleece vest over a button-up he probably Febrezed instead of washing. He walked in mid-sentence, apologizing with a grin and zero eye contact. He froze when he saw Ben. It was subtle, but I clocked it, the stumble in his stride. The quick glance to Julie like she'd suddenly grown a second head. And finally, that flash of recognition, the one that says, "Oh no, I've seen you before, where have I seen you?" Ben didn't look up. He just opened his laptop and began typing. Calm, silent, present. Warren recovered, sort of, cleared his throat and mumbled something about oversight continuity. Julie gave a vague nod. Her eyes flicked between the two of them, but she kept reading her script. "We appreciate your contributions, and we're confident this transition will be as smooth as possible." I almost laughed. Smooth wasn't the word I'd use for what was coming. Ben finally looked at me. Not a smile, not even a raised eyebrow, just a nod, a silent signal, confirmation. He'd seen the invite, he chose to be here, and with that the trap was officially set. For the next 20 minutes I played the role. I signed the exit forms. I asked perfunctory questions about benefits rollover and final paychecks. Warren sat stiffly, answering only when prompted. His confidence was paper-thin now. Julie didn't notice, or pretended not to. Ben said nothing, but the silence was seismic. The meeting ended like a bad date, forced smiles, vague promises to stay in touch, and a parting gift, a branded notebook with the company logo, as if that was supposed to make up for a decade of erosion. I tucked it into my bag like a souvenir from a failed cult. As we filed out, Ben remained behind. Warren hesitated at the door, clearly unsure whether to shake his hand or run. In the end, he did neither. He just left. I walked out into the hallway, the fluorescent lights suddenly too bright. It was done. Not the fallout, not yet, but the first domino had tipped. The silence had been broken, and the reckoning had begun. It started with a whisper, just a breeze, really. The kind of office chatter that slips between cubicles and hides behind forced laughter. Around noon, I heard it. "Did you hear about the freeze?" A murmur near the printer. Someone from finance, voice pitched a little too high to sound casual. I didn't flinch, just stirred my yogurt and kept scrolling through my offboarding checklist. 2 rows down, I heard it again, this time from accounting. All expense reports just got locked, every last one. I closed my eyes for half a second. Ben hadn't just attended the meeting. He'd pulled the lever. No email, no message, no heads up, just a quiet act of escalation. That's how real auditors move, without fanfare, without warning. I'd given him 6 months of breadcrumbs, and he'd finally decided to follow the trail through the front door. By 1:15 p.m., the finance team's Slack channel had gone full DEFCON 2. Screenshots flew like confetti. "Account frozen, contact your admin." Budget owners were pinging each other, trying to figure out who pulled the plug. Purchase order systems went dark. Someone tried to expense a $42 lunch from brand development strategy and got a rejection prompt that just said, "Access restricted." I refreshed my inbox. Nothing, no calls, no panicked messages from Warren. Interesting. By 2 o'clock, someone said the words out loud. Auditor escalated it. I was in the break room, sipping stale coffee from a paper cup. Danielle from procurement walked in, phone in hand, whispered it like it was a curse. Apparently he flagged the termination, said it was retaliatory, escalated it to his firm. She didn't look at me, but she didn't need to. Everyone knew who he was, and everyone knew who I was. I took another sip, lukewarm, bitter, perfect. Around 2:45, I passed by accounting on my way to shred some old compliance binders. Their door was half open. Inside, I saw Marcy, the director, arguing with someone over speakerphone. Her voice was tight, clipped. "No, I don't know what Freeze Directive 041 is. It's not ours. It's coming from the audit firm, not internal. We're just as blind." "Yes," I said, "we're checking with legal." I paused at the water cooler just long enough to hear her slam the phone down. By 3 o'clock p.m., people were officially spiraling. HR sent out a vague email about temporary administrative restrictions due to routine compliance review. Kind of language that means, oh God, something's happening and we're not allowed to tell you what. The irony? I was still technically employed, still had badge access, still had a functioning email. While everyone else was scrambling, I was quietly backing up folders to my encrypted drive, finishing my handover checklist, forwarding last bits of documentation to the audit support at Alias I'd created 6 weeks ago, just in case. At 3:17 p.m., Warren finally emerged. I watched him from the hallway. He was hunched over, tie crooked, phone glued to his ear. He walked past our shared kitchenette like a man trying not to look guilty. But his eyes darted like a cornered animal. I heard one sentence, clipped, low, urgent. "I don't know who escalated it, okay? I didn't approve a freeze liar." Of course he didn't approve it. That's what made it beautiful. By 3:45, the special projects folder had disappeared from the shared drive. Vanished. Not archived, not restricted. Gone, which only confirmed what I already knew. It had been real and it had been dangerous. The best part? No one had asked me a single question. Not HR, not legal, not Warren. They didn't dare, because they knew. They knew if they pulled too hard on any thread I left behind, the whole suit would come apart, and none of them were wearing underwear. I went home at 5:01 p.m., took the stairs instead of the elevator, didn't say goodbye. The office was so quiet it felt like church after a scandal. When I stepped outside, the sun hit me like a spotlight, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't win, not yet, but the machine was starting to eat itself, and all I had to do now was listen. It happened around 9:42 a.m. on Tuesday, 2 full business days after the exit interview. That's how long it took for the cracks to show in Warren's perfectly gelled facade. I was sitting at my desk, calmly labeling a backup drive CYA final in all caps, when I heard the unmistakable stomp of polished shoes over vinyl tiles. Not the confident clip-clop of a man in charge. No, this was different. This was the frantic, jittery cadence of a man whose kingdom was on fire, and who just realized the fire extinguisher was full of gasoline. Warren blew through the office like a heat wave in a server room, face blotchy, shirt wrinkled, tie loosened like he'd lost a fight with a fax machine. He wasn't even pretending to smile anymore. Just red in the face and white in the knuckles, clutching his phone like it might confess something if he squeezed hard enough. Where the hell is Marcy? He barked at no one in particular, scanning accounting like a man hunting for the last life vest on the Titanic. Why wasn't I notified about the freeze on line item 47B? Line item 47B. That was special projects. Code for whatever shadowy spending buffet he'd been gorging on since last spring. Golf junkets, phantom consultants, emergency retention, bonuses to people who conveniently never showed up on org charts. I knew every greasy transaction by heart. I'd reconciled every lie, and now it was frozen. He spun on his heel and nearly collided with Danielle, who jumped back like he was contagious. She offered nothing but a terrified shrug. Good girl. I sat at my desk, wrapping a USB cable with the kind of precision usually reserved for bomb disposal. I didn't look up, didn't speak, didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Panic was doing all the talking. Marcy from accounting eventually emerged, flanked by 2 interns and holding a folder like it was radioactive. I caught a piece of her hushed reply. We've been told not to touch anything flagged by the audit firm. Yes, Warren, that includes your budget lines. I wanted to frame that sentence. Hang it on a wall like a diploma. Warren's face did something grotesque then. A twitch, a hiccup of rage so sudden I thought he might start gnawing on the conference room table. He turned, locked eyes with me for the first time in days. And in that moment he knew. He knew exactly what I'd done. He didn't say a word, just stared. His lips parted like he might speak, but no sound came out. He looked like a man halfway through a car crash. I tilted my head just slightly. A silent, elegant what expression. Then I reached into the drawer and pulled out the small cardboard box I'd set aside last week, the same one that once held a shipment of branded mousepads no one wanted. I started packing. Not angrily, not dramatically, just methodically. Mouse, keyboard wrist rest, desk cactus. One mug that said coffee and compliance in Comic Sans. A tiny printout of a comic strip I liked, featuring a stick figure drowning in paperwork saying, "At least I'm productive about it." The office wasn't loud anymore. It was humming, that low, terrified murmur of an ecosystem turning on itself. Emails flew, doors shut. HR had locked their Slack status to do not disturb. Every other screen was frozen on spreadsheets people were pretending to understand. I took my time, no rush, let the air steep in dread. Let the silence stretch until it snapped. When I stood up, Warren was pacing in front of Marcy's door, phone back at his ear, gesturing wildly like he was conducting an orchestra of chaos. I walked right past him. He stepped aside without a word. The hallway lights flickered as I passed, coincidence probably, but I let myself imagine it was the building tipping its hat. The elevator dinged. I stepped in alone. No goodbyes, no exit interview sequel. Just me, my little box, and the beautiful implosion I left behind. Vindication wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady. I didn't need to scream. Warren was doing it for me. The boardroom on the 17th floor had always looked more like a spa waiting lounge than a place where people made million-dollar decisions. Pale wood, cushy gray chairs, a 12-foot mission statement stenciled on the back wall in an unreadable sans serif font. Innovation, agility, integrity. The irony of that last word could have powered the damn building. I wasn't there, obviously. By then, I was sipping burnt diner coffee out of a chipped ceramic mug 2 towns over, watching a freight train roll past the window like it was a sermon. But I'd worked there long enough to know exactly how that meeting went down. At 9 a.m. sharp, the board gathered for what the invite labeled Executive Oversight Session Urgent, the kind of subject line that turns VPs into wet towels. The CFO had called it, which meant it wasn't optional, which meant Warren was screwed. First thing up on the screen, projection of quarterly discretionary spending from the past 18 months. A very long, very red line curved sharply upward like a lie someone stopped trying to hide. Underneath, 5 entries. Phoenix Synergy Group $187,900. Project Echo $236,000. Special Projects $928,000. Vendor TBD $314,700. Executive Strategic Development $411,500. Total $2.07 million. No deliverables, no contracts, no explanations. Then came the second slide. This one had metadata. Each expense was tagged with an approving officer. Every tag read, W. Landry VP Strategic Operations, and somewhere on that slide, in a smaller font, highlighted in orange by someone who clearly had a sense of theater, was the timestamp from Friday's exit interview, cross-referenced with a sudden surge of flagged transactions from the audit firm's compliance system. Ben had submitted a preliminary incident report that morning. Legal's turn. The general counsel stood, cleared his throat, and dropped a folder on the table with a quiet thump. Inside, a formal notification that the audit firm had triggered Article 9 of the Oversight Agreement. It meant one thing: an investigation had started. Effective immediately, all discretionary funds not tied to existing contractual obligations were frozen. Expense accounts locked. Vendor payments paused. Project Echo on hold. Phoenix Synergy under review. Every shell company Warren had floated to funnel money into his side hustle dreams exposed. You could almost hear the oxygen leave the room. Someone, probably Meredith from Investor Relations, asked, "Why now?" The answer came not from legal, but from the auditor himself, who had dialed in via Zoom. His face on the giant screen was pinched professional. He looked like he'd slept 2 hours in a Motel 6 and still read the fine print for fun. "We believe the termination of your compliance manager may have been retaliatory," he said plainly. She raised multiple red flags. Her documentation was thorough. "Our team has been quietly following her paper trail for months." Another director asked, "So this was planned?" "No," Ben replied. "She just knew where to look." That's when it stopped being about money and started being about liability. Warren tried to interrupt, he always did, but legal shut him down fast. The company's external counsel was now involved, and the audit firm had filed a notice of material concern with the state board. Translation: someone might be going to jail. They ended the meeting without a resolution. Just the usual boardroom exit shuffle, loose papers, awkward eye contact, one or two people already texting their private attorneys. Warren didn't say much after that. He didn't need to. The numbers had spoken. And the woman he erased had become the ghost rattling every chain. By the time I finished my coffee and paid the bill in cash, my phone buzzed with a message from an old coworker I hadn't heard from in months. "Girl, what the hell did you do? It just froze everything." I stared at the screen, didn't respond. Instead, I tucked my phone in my jacket pocket and stepped out into the sun. It was brighter than I remembered. Let them panic. Let the money dry up. Let the board trace every signature back to the same trembling hand. They wanted me gone. But now they'd have to live in the mess I'd been cleaning up for a decade. And I wasn't there to mop up this time. They gave him one final chance to explain himself. A special session, closed doors, no assistants, no distractions, just Warren sitting under a boardroom light that suddenly felt a hell of a lot hotter than usual. Across the table sat 11 board members, flanked by legal counsel, with printouts fanned before them like evidence in a courtroom. At the center of it all was one simple question, read by the chairman himself with all the grace of a guillotine, who authorized over $2 million under the budget line labeled Special Projects. Warren stammered. Of course he did. He had that gift of speaking for 20 minutes and saying absolutely nothing. He launched into jargon soup: cross-functional pivot initiatives, innovation accelerators, vendor performance modeling. It was the verbal equivalent of throwing glitter at a crime scene. The board wasn't buying it. Not today. One director, a man who hadn't spoken in 2 meetings, held up a single-page printout. "This is from the audit firm's preliminary findings. It traces every transaction to your approval chain. Your initials, your login credentials, your IP address." He dropped it on the table like a coffin lid. Silence. Then legal slid a document across the table, an internal policy Warren himself had helped write, outlining the exact thresholds for discretionary spending without board oversight. He'd exceeded it 10 times over. The chairman leaned forward. "Why was none of this disclosed?" Warren's voice cracked. I assumed they were categorized under executive discretion, which, the auditor interrupted from the video screen, only applies under emergency operations and only when documented. Which these weren't. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "Jesus." CFO closed her folder and simply said, "He's cooked." The words weren't metaphorical. By the time the meeting ended, Warren was suspended pending investigation. His badge deactivated, his calendar locked. A security guard escorted him out, no dramatics, no shouting, just a quiet, surreal walk past the same people who once feared him. He didn't look at anyone, especially not the empty chair where I used to sit. At that same hour, 11:22 a.m., I was finishing my walk down the back stairs of the building, cardboard box in hand, the same one I'd packed with dull supplies and razor-sharp memories. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked where I was going. I was yesterday's file, processed, archived, forgotten, which was perfect, because forgotten people don't set off alarms. They pull wires behind the walls. As I stepped into the parking lot, the wind kicked up just enough to lift the corner of the lid. Post-it fluttered loose, one I'd written months ago in a late-night flurry of sarcasm and spite. It read, "The only thing more dangerous than someone who knows where the bodies are is someone who buried them by policy." I tucked it back in. No farewell emails, no speech. No teary-I gave this place everything goodbye. I didn't need to say anything. The system had spoken for me. By 3 p.m., news of the freeze had reached our investors. By 5, three more senior managers had quietly updated their LinkedIn bios to open to work. By Friday, half the department had been pulled into interviews with external counsel. And me? I was home, barefoot, cross-legged on my couch, watching reruns of old sitcoms and sipping lukewarm wine out of a mug that said, "I don't rise and grind, I sip and smirk." The phone buzzed nonstop. Former coworkers, distant execs, even one board assistant asking if I'd be willing to consult during the transition. I didn't reply. Not yet. Let them sit in it. Let the whole machine chew itself to pieces trying to fix a mess it never acknowledged until it was too late. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't even raise my voice. All I did was add one name to a calendar invite, and it was enough to bring down a king. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.